So the last 16 draw for the Champions League 25-26 was made on Friday, and it's caused a bit of outcry and controversy. So before we go into this discussion, it's just worth going through the draw again, because essentially what a lot of people's issue with this is one side of the draw is particularly weighted with former champions, and the other side, in some people's words, is more like a Europa League draw. So on the one side, you have Paris Saint-Germain, the current European champions. They will play Chelsea, who are the current world champions and Conference League holders. You have Galatasaray versus the current Premier League champions, Liverpool. You've got Real Madrid versus Manchester City, and I'll come on to that tie in a bit more detail in a bit. And then you've got Atalanta versus Bayern Munich. Then on the other side of the draw, you've got Newcastle versus Barcelona, Atletico Madrid versus Tottenham, Bodo Glimt versus Sporting Lisbon, and Bayer Leverkusen versus Arsenal. So when we look at this draw, I can understand people's reactions. You know, Paris Saint-Germain, Chelsea, Liverpool, Real Madrid, Manchester City, and Bayern Munich have all won the Champions League since 2020. Atalanta have also won the Europa League in 2024. So only Galatasaray of those 8 teams are the odd one out. Their only European triumph coming in the 2000 UEFA Cup. However, on the opposite side of the draw, Champions League winners are few and far between. So Newcastle have never won it. Barcelona have, but not since the 2010s. Atletico Madrid have not won it, but they've been to a number of finals, only obviously fierce rivals Real Madrid stopping them. Tottenham are Europa League winners and were runners-up in the Champions League in 2019. Bodo Glimt, surprise package, never gone this far in the European Champions League or European Champions Club Cup. Sporting, well, they've not made an impact on this tournament at all. Bayer Leverkusen were Europa League runners-up to Atalanta in 2024, and Arsenal, while currently top of the Premier League, have not yet won the Champions League and not been in a final since 2006. So you can see there is a clear kind of weighted element to the draw. Now, I want to focus on Real Madrid versus Man City in particular, because this is one of the few things I've seen where it's not just fans saying this draw is not right. Jorge Valdano of Real Madrid has questioned, why are they playing Man City again? Now, the reason I picked this one is because they have been meeting each other rather regularly in the UEFA Champions League. They met each other in the knockout round last year, so the round earlier than this. And it's interesting because if the European Super League proposal had gone ahead in 2021, then Real Madrid versus Manchester City would have been a regular fixture in that version. Now, the problem here, and it's not a problem for me, but it's a problem really for the people of, who run Madrid and Man City, is the meeting is coming too early again. Now, this is the European the Champions League. You should be able to play and beat anyone, if you're going to win it. But UEFA has engineered this competition since 1992, and especially since kind of 96, 97, when they started to let second place teams in, and then third, and then fourth, and then in some cases fifth place teams in. And it's been engineered to get the biggest teams through to the knockout stages. Now, as I say, from a neutral point of view, seeing Real Madrid Man City at any point in a knockout round is it's usually going to produce two pretty good games. They're usually memorable. But for the people behind the scenes at Real Madrid and Manchester City, there's a problem here, because there's a slightly different problem, but it resolves around money. And the UEFA Champions League is built on making as much money as possible. Now, for Real Madrid, their problem is it's not about European prestige per se, because they've won enough Champions Leagues and European Champions Club Cups. They're so far ahead of everyone else in terms of competitions won. What their issue is, and it's financial, is they need to keep up with the Premier League. And to do that, they don't want to be going out of the Champions League at the round of 16. They want to be getting through to the semis and and the final, and obviously potentially winning it. That will enable them to earn more money and to try and keep up with the financial power of the Premier League. Man City, on the other hand, have got the opposite. They've won plenty of Premier Leagues and FA Cups and League Cups, but they've only won one Champions League, so they haven't got the prestige of Real Madrid or even Liverpool or Manchester United. So they need to be getting to the final and winning. So the problem here is for both of them, yes, while they would love to meet each other in the final or even a semi-final per se, round of 16 is too early for them. So there'll be voices from the Real Madrid hierarchy and the Manchester City hierarchy behind the scenes at UEFA saying, hey, come on, this ain't right. Now add to that Liverpool. Now you would think that, but Liverpool have got Galatasaray. What's the problem here? The problem here is last year, in the first edition of this new phase of the Champions League, Liverpool came top. And who did they draw? Paris Saint-Germain. And they were defeated in the last 16 to Paris Saint-Germain. Now, if they had beaten Paris Saint-Germain and everything else had stayed the same, then they would have played Premier League Aston Villa in the quarterfinals and then Premier League Arsenal in the semi-finals. Now, contrast this to Arsenal this season. So Arsenal finished top of the group, the league phase this season. They played Bayer Leverkusen. So while Bayer Leverkusen shouldn't be underestimated, they are not the champions of Germany, as Paris Saint-Germain were champions of France, who Liverpool faced last year. And if they beat Leverkusen, which they are expected to do, then they won't face a team from the Premier League or La Liga or Serie A. They will face either Bodo Glimt or Sporting Lisbon. So again, Arsenal would be expected to win that tie. So only at the semi-final stage would they get either a La Liga side in Atletico Madrid or Barcelona or a Premier League side in Tottenham or Newcastle. So you can see that while Liverpool outwardly would say, yep, great draw, again, behind the scenes, they'll be saying to UEFA, well, hold on, we won the group, the league phase last season, and we got Paris Saint-Germain, and our run to the final would have been quite difficult. But look at Arsenal's. So I was interested with the fan reaction, and it wasn't just the fan reaction, it was the journalist reaction, writers' reaction, to this draw. And I couldn't, I can understand why people are kind of like saying this draw is lopsided, but I'm kind of lost for words because I almost feel with people didn't quite say it, but how dare Bodo Glimt and Sporting Lisbon be paired together? It's almost like yes, they can get to this round, but they shouldn't go any further. And I think this has been the problem with the UEFA Champions League and how it's been engineered, that a lot of people now think that way as well. Why should Real Madrid play Manchester City in the last 16? Why should Paris Saint-Germain and Chelsea play each other in the last 16? Surely Sporting should be playing Real Madrid. Bodo should be playing Manchester City. And it's almost like an arrogance that the Champions League has produced over the since the 90s, that I think everything's wrong with the competition. Now, the one good thing about the draw that I see is it's the last tenuous link to the European Champions Club Cup. Because while UEFA can push all the smaller champions into all the qualifying stages and, keep giving more places to the Premier League, to the Bundesliga, to La Liga, etc., because the way the coefficients work, they can't yet control, one, who will finish where in the league phase, and then who will draw who in the knockout. First of all, the knockout round, then the last 16. They cannot control that. And what my concern is here, with both the noise coming from fans and the media, and also from this, the behind the scenes talks that will naturally happen with Real Madrid, City and Liverpool probably amongst the foremost, but possibly PSG and Chelsea saying again they shouldn't be meeting at the round of the last 16. UEFA, in a couple of years, I don't believe it will be next year, but the next time they come to make any changes to this format, they will tweak this. And I think this is where this competition is, for a long time for me, it has lost its credibility to be anything more than a European Super League. It's got permanent members. Yes, Real Madrid have to qualify through the La Liga every year. Barcelona have to do the same. Bayern Munich, Paris Paris Saint-Germain, etc. But, if they have an off season, it's unbelievably rare that they finish outside their given top four, or, in the Premier League's case, the top five. The Premier League is the only one that kind of keeps this alive, because that, while we may have had Manchester City up at the top pretty much consistently, say over the last 10 years, you don't have a set number of, you don't have what we had in the mid to the late 2000s, where it was United, Chelsea, Liverpool and Arsenal, and that was it. Yes, Everton threatened, Tottenham threatened, but for a number of years it was just those four clubs. And it was a surprise to see not, one of them not qualify. So now it's a bit more, because you have Newcastle, you have Aston Villa, you have United, you have Chelsea, Arsenal, Liverpool, obviously City already mentioned. So, there's quite a few clubs who can, attack the Champions League and the Premier League. So that's the only league where you're not going to have constant permanent members. So with the outcry with this round of 16 draw, I'm kind of worried that, as I say, UEFA will make tweaks to this to ensure that you do not get pairings of Real Madrid, Man City in the last 16 ever again, that you don't get Paris Saint-Germain versus Chelsea, that you don't get Bodo Glimt versus Sporting Lisbon. Bodo Glimt especially have had to fight through a qualifying round, then get through a league stage, which is designed for the bigger clubs to get through. Yes, you can say it helps the smaller clubs as well, but it's mainly to help the bigger clubs get through, because, again, and I've said this in my book, Sleepwalking to a Super League, and I'll put the link below, while UEFA have, kept with their promise of having bigger and more meaningful games in the group stage, look at when Pot 1 teams play Pot 1 teams, the biggest fixtures. For the 2 seasons so far, and this is not an accident, you do not see a Pot 1 team play a Pot 1 team on match day 8. You don't see Real Madrid, Man City on match day 8. You don't see Liverpool, Paris Saint-Germain on match day 8. Now, you could say that's because, they would have already qualified by then. But actually, in reality, it's because what they don't want is, for any reason, if, Manchester City, like they did last season, have a couple of bad games, they don't want their 2 Pot 1 fixtures to be fixtures 7 and 8. So the league phase is engineered to get the biggest clubs through. Now, of course, things can happen on the pitch that derail that. But as the last 2 league phases have shown, you only have to, you can lose 3, almost four games in the case of Benfica this year and still get through to the knockout phase. Yes, it's not the last 16, but you still qualify. So what I would say to everyone is, while, yes, this draw looks a bit lopsided, Arsenal's path looks easy, what I'd hate to see, and what will happen, is in a couple of years, this phase will be engineered so you do not get the big ties now. And to me, to be European champions was, first of all, you win your league. Then you go in to play other clubs who have won their league, and you play them home and away, and then if you're good enough, you get through. And if you make it all the way to the final and lift the trophy, then you are champions of Europe. I know we'll never go back to that. The scale of European football has changed. So I appreciate we'll never go back to that. But if you engineer it even more so to get Real Madrid to not really have a game of significance till the quarterfinals, and you essentially say, well, yeah, okay, Bodo Glimt, Sporting Lisbon as well. Last 16 is as far as you're going to get, unless you pull off a miracle in the actual matches. But we're going to engineer it, and this is what will happen. So while, as I say, the outcry I can understand about the draw, be careful what you wish for. If you think I'm talking rubbish, I'll put the link to my book below in the description. Have a read of it, because that details all the minor changes. Some of them big changes, but some of them minor. The Champions League is engineered to get the biggest clubs through, and UEFA's power lies with the Champions League. Take the UEFA Champions League out of UEFA and put it in, the club's hands or someone else's hands, and what power does UEFA have on world football? They don't. This is why FIFA is desperately trying to get into the club game with the expanded Club World Cup. They've got the the best international tournament, the World Cup, but most of the world's best players now play in the UEFA Champions League every season. So UEFA will do whatever's necessary, and UEFA themselves don't want Real Madrid or Man City going out in the last 16. Whatever they say, they'll champion Bodo Glimt, but they don't want them going too far. So they will make changes. So be careful what you wish for, because in a couple of years, this draw won't even be random anymore. It will be engineered to make sure that the biggest teams get through. And I will say this: no team has got a God-given right to be, to get an easy path through to the quarterfinals. But UEFA have done that, and will continue to do it to keep the big clubs on side. So enjoy this randomness of this last 16 draw, because in a couple of years, we will not have it again.